So this is like my material. I've made this material to simulate this kind of image right here. So we're going to take a look at that reference image. Again, I have two of it, so let's look at that one. So here's my reference image. Something I like to do is let's go ahead and go to the Software Center and let's see if they added it. I hope they did. If they did not, I'm going to be very sad. Pure ref. This is because I do not have two monitors. So, okay, they don't have PureRef. Well, I'm going to show you guys PureRef now because it's very useful. So PureRef. So the cool thing about PureRef is it is a free application. You just go here to personal, choose your platform. Down here, you can say custom amount. And you can just say 0. They're going to thumbs up you. And you're going to download. And you might not be able to get on the school computers. If not, we'll have to see if we can get it on the Software Center. But I think I should have admin by request. So if you guys have admin requests, then you can do that. God, that's so annoying. Well, let's see if it installs. I highly doubt it. Nope. Okay. Sorry, guys. No, PureRef. All right. So anyways, the cool thing about PureRef is it's essentially a mood board, so you can put a lot of images in it. One of the nice features of PureRef is it has an always on top feature. So you can put it like over your screen and it will stay there even if I'm doing stuff in here, right? It's not going to go underneath Substance Painter. So it makes it really easy if you're, especially if you're on a single monitor, if you want to look at your reference while you're working. Okay. All right. So I'm going to walk you guys through kind of like what I did here for my material. I'm going to go ahead and just add all of my materials here. So I'm going to just go ahead and put these all in folder. So we're just going to take this up there. All right, here we go. Hopefully nothing changes. We'll see. Okay, good. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and go step by step. I'm going to go ahead and turn all these guys off. And I'm going to talk about what I did. All right. So the first thing I like to do is I like to go ahead and work from either base fill layer, or I'm going to, sorry, this is distracting. All right. So, whoa, sorry guys. Ugh. So I usually either like to do something like this, where I'll just start with a base material and work with my base parameters, right? So in this case, I'm going for this kind of like tarnished bronze. So it's not a very pure metal. So it's going to act like a metal, but it's not going to be quite a pure metal. And so what I can do is I'll just take like the base color. I can color sample it, and I'll set it up in a second to show you guys how we can do that. But I might do like something like this. Go ahead and make it mostly metallic. Give it a, I can always come back to the roughness later, and I'm going to build this up over time, but I might give it something kind of like this. Then what I can do to give it a little bit of, especially with metals, this is something I like to do with metals, is I like to right click on the layer and say add filter. So filters are going to be all of our like cool adjustment features. So it can do things like sharpening or adjusting your color or doing something like warping your image. So it has a bunch of cool like Photoshop filter effects. So we're going to come in here, and they have down here these things called matte finishes. So these are really nice for metals. So I'm going to go ahead and give it, I like this matte rough, right? And so that just gives it a little bit of like this kind of roughness specular breakup. I'm going to bring the intensity down. So I'm just going to bring the brush intensity down. But I like doing that just as like a base way of just adding a little bit of interest and breakup on the surface for free, right? So the name of the game is going to be in all of our color or texture channels. So let's start with base color. In all our texture channels, we want a lot of variety to them, right? We're going to want a lot of information. So if I look at, actually I want to hide this one for a second. I'm going to look at this other texture map. So this one could be better, but this is another one I already have. So here's my base color. Here's my metallic map. Here's my roughness map. Here's my normal height mesh map, right? That's just combining all height and normal information together. And it looks something kind of like this, right? So we're going to, at the end, we're going to want to make sure like all of our texture channels have texturing information in them. They don't have to be like wild and crazy. It doesn't have to have like super high dynamic stuff, but we do want breakup in pretty much everything, even if it is super subtle. So we're going to come in here. So this gives the nice thing, what this is going to do, it's good to kind of investigate as you're adding things in, like especially if you're starting from a base material and you don't quite know what the base material is doing, it's a good idea to go through your channels and take a look at it, right? So if I'm going to take this stylized rough metal and I'll hide the original one. So it looks like this. I'm pressing M on my keyboard. And you can see this is stylized, so we're not going to use it. But I'm going to take a look through my color map or my map. So you can see this one's doing a lot of stuff in the base color. A little bit of stuff in the metallic and roughness, nothing in the normal map, nothing in the height map. And if sometimes it's hard to tell on the normal height mesh, but there's nothing going on here. So this one's very different than the other one I have, right? So this one right here, I'm mostly doing like an enormous adjustment. It's kind of like the anisotropy effect, but not quite. So anyways, so I'm going to take that matte finish and I'm going to bring the brushing intensity down a little bit. Okay. So the alternative is to start from a base material. So in this case, I have here this antique bronze that I found in my, I might have downloaded this one actually. Yeah, I probably downloaded it. So nowadays, I don't know if this version of Substance has it, but the newest version of Substance, they have the, oh, never mind, it's right here. So they have this attached to it. I'm logged into my school account, which doesn't have any credits, but my personal account has credits. And so you can search for materials, models, things like that. So I think I looked for antique. Let's just see what happens with, oh, antique. And let's look at materials. Huh, okay, weird. Bronze, let's do that. Oh, let's get rid of this. Okay, there we go. It was set to free assets, probably because I don't have any downloads. But you can see there's all these different interesting materials. You can make it bigger. I'm going to just increase the display size so I can look at these a little bit better. And so these are just like base materials that have cool variations to them. You could look at them inside of the web browser too. But yeah, so I probably have one at home that was just in my library. But anyways, so looking at this one, I have a little bit of information in my base color, a little bit of information in my roughness, and a little bit of information in my height channel. Nothing that is we can't do easily just ourselves. So we're just going to ignore this one and we're going to go with this one. All right, I'm going to make it a little bit darker too. Okay, cool. So let's get rid of this one. So the first thing I like to do, or I'm going to do is looking at my reference here. What I was doing earlier was I had this right here. So I actually added this layer that is just metal, right? So I used this layer right here to tweak the metalness, right? So I wanted my that bronze metal to not be so metallic because when I look at this, it doesn't seem like the reflections aren't super tinted and colored. So it makes me think it's like pretty corroded or changed over time. So I have this layer here where I'm just making the metalness lower, right? And if we look at that metalness layer, right, it's going from white to dark gray, right? I'm going to be lazy and I'm actually going to keep going with this. I'm not going to use my fill layer. So one of the first things I like to do is add color breakup. So what I'll do is I'll look at something like this and I'll look at in my base material. And also one of the things I'll think about is I'll think about this in layers, right? I think about this as how many different materials are there here? Like I have very distinct materials here that I can choose to focus on. So I have my bronze layer, right? That makes sense. I have this like white kind of dust dirt pack thing. I called it white crud. That's not a great name. And then also we have our patina, right? That's that green kind of corrosion that's showing up in a lot of these areas, right? So those are three different layers I'm going to have. I'm going to have my bronze material, this white gunk, and then the patina. Okay, so I'm going to focus and ignore the white gunk and the patina for now, and I'm going to just build up my base bronze layer. That's what I generally is the wisest thing to do is start with your base material, like the things underneath everything or the raw form, and start there. So another thing I like to do too is the cool thing is you can color select, right? So if I come over here and we take a look at this, if I want to grab a specific color, so actually let's go ahead and add a fill layer. The cool thing, or one of the most helpful things I learned in Substance Painter recently is that if you come over here and you alt click on the, first thing first, I'm going to really quickly do something really quick. Turn height range off. Okay. I just remembered that was going to be a problem. All right. So when I add a fill layer, by default, it overrides or adds something to all my channels, which is okay, but not what I want. In this case, I only want to be affecting color. So if you hold Alt and click on it, you'll see that all the other channels are turned off, and this layer is only affecting the color and not affecting the roughness or metalness. Very cool. So if I wanted to, like, let's say I wanted to try to accurately get that color of the surface, one of the things that you can do is to use a color picker. If you're using a color picker on an image, you got to be aware that this surface is being lit, right? So it is being affected by the color of the light around it. It might be in shadow, or it might be a highlight or a specular reflection. So usually I try to find like somewhere that's not a reflection. So you can see there's reflections here, spec reflections. And then there's these shadows here, which are like darker areas. So that's not going to give me an accurate base color. So I'm going to look for something that's like kind of like in a medium zone. So I might choose something like that. And that might give me a good base color. I'm going to go with what I have here, but that's just something I like to do as well. So another thing I can do too is if I go to Photoshop, to kind of get past these shadow and light information. So I like to do this sometimes for actually using texture maps and using them in my color maps themselves and get rid of light and shadow. What I'm going to do is let's go ahead and file, open on your computer, downloads, press not ref. There we go. Is you can come in here, you go to image adjustments. And this can work sometimes, sometimes doesn't work that well. But shadows and highlights is a cool option or tool for removing the shadows and highlights from your image, which tends to give you a more raw or pure color. But it's image based, it's not perfect, right? It's just taking a guess. So as you increase the shadows, you can see, like, look at those shadow areas, right? They're being kind of like flattened out in value, but the hue is staying behind. And then same thing with the highlights, right? I can do the same thing where I'm taking those and all the highlight areas are being flattened, right? You can make some adjustments based on what you think should happen, right? If you need to push the color saturation a little bit more, or you need to change the midtones, right? Which if you drop it down lower, it can flatten it even more. But this is one way I've done in the past, and I actually did for this one, where I wanted to color pick this, but get more accurate colors that weren't affected by light and shadow. So it's just a cool trick you can do. I'm just going to go ahead and crop this down. I don't need everything else. Get out here. And I'm going to go ahead and Control-Alt-S, and I'm going to save as that copy. Escape. Okay. Say no. All right, we're gonna come back here, and if I come over here and we're gonna close that, and I'm gonna go ahead and open up that copy. Here we go. So now I have some colors I can work with, which is really cool. Let's go ahead and scoot this over. I don't need that much space for my reference. I do have to keep in mind that I need to go back and look at my reference, right? Because this is like an unfiltered kind of version of my material. And if I go with this one, here's another version of it. If I go with this one and I ignore this one, I'm probably going to end up with like too punchy of a color. It's going to be too saturated, but that's easy to dial back from. It's just a tool for me to use. So I might come in here and I might actually choose like a color like this, right? This has like a little bit more color and punch to it. And that's cool. All right. So for color breakup, let's turn this one on. You can see I'm starting to actually, I'm going to hide this one because I use them for the darker material. So again, sorry, I'm going back using my old one. So let's delete that one. So here I'm adding color breakup. So this is my default base color, right? It's kind of like this brown orange. And looking at it, there's like some big color changes. This is one of the things that I think most people miss out on is color breakup. Color breakup is incredibly helpful for making your surfaces feel rich and more interesting. Color breakup essentially means that from far away, you still think of it as that bronze color, but when you get closer, you'll start to see there's different tones, right? We have like these, like if you look at this area right here, and actually let me come in here and use that color picker, right? You can see this is like an orange color, and this is like a yellow color. If I looked at those with with this color wheel, right? If I come over here and I select this one, you can see the color wheel moves closer to red. But if I select this one right here, this moves closer to yellow-green, right? So this has a lot of color breakup, and that's something that a lot of people miss out on. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a fill layer, and I started out just doing base color. So let's just start there. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn this one on. And this one right here is just adding a little bit of that oranger color in here. And if we open this up, the reason why it looks yellow, but it's giving me a really rich orange color is because I have a different blending mode. So raise your hand if you don't know what blending modes are. Again, I reward people who are brave for admitting ignorance. Who knows what a blending mode is? All right, what's blending mode?
Mode is kind of like it takes the information layer below it and it either like the multiply, it darken the value or add or like screen and lighten it, overlay. I
That's
forget
both.
specific. It's both. Okay.
Yeah, no, you're great. Totally good. Thank you. So if you guys don't know what blending modes are and you're being coy about it, I would look up Substance Painter blending mode, Substance Painter blending modes, because they actually have really great videos that just talk about like what the blending modes do. So not only does it tell you like a little as much as you need to know as what's actually happening, but more importantly, they show you why it's useful, like why would you want to use it and what effect is it going to have on your layers. Blending modes are essential. There's a lot of things that are essential in Substance Painter to know how to use it functionally, but blending modes are crucial to make interesting textures because without blending modes, all we're doing is, if I set this to normal, all I'm doing is I'm replacing, let's look at just the color map, right? So if I use a blending mode, or if I use a normal blending mode, which is the default, all it does is this layer just overlays on top of the other layer. Let's go ahead and disable the map for a second. So I'm going to toggle the mask. There you go. So I'm just overlaying the layer below, right? Blending modes are actually going to interact. They're going to take all the information below and actually start to mix them together. So if I use screen, for instance, it's going to probably too bright, but here, if we do here, there we go. So if I do screen, actually, okay, this is a terrible example because opacity is obviously going to change things. Let's use a darker color. All right, there we go. We can see the layer below. So screen, if I look at this normal, it's like this dark brown, but if I set to screen, what it's going to do is it's going to take the color and it's going to brighten all the information below. So you can see that, right? If I set this to multiply, that's going to do the opposite. It's going to darken. Let's go ahead and set this brighter so we can see it, right? So if I look at the default color, it looks like this, but then when I go to multiply, it's mixing with the layer below and darkening, right? We have a couple other ones. Overlay is another one that I use, which is kind of doing a little bit of both. Overlays like can brighten and darken. So it depends on what you want to do. But generally speaking, we want to go ahead and use blending modes whenever we want to mix we want to add a feature to our surface, but we want to keep something from below, right? So if I'm adding in smudge prints in the specular roughness, right? I want it to look a little smudged or touched, right? I want it still have the roughness of the underlying material. I just want to modify it a little bit, just give it a little bit of roughness, right? So anyways, blending modes are going to make your textures much richer and more interesting. Let me go ahead and control Z this back. There we go. All right. So I set mine to overlay by default. Whenever I don't know if I want to brighten or darken, usually I just set it to overlay. Let's go ahead and turn my mask back on. So I'm going to toggle my mask. There we go. And let's go back here. And I think I probably just need to turn this back up. There we go. All right. So we can see that layer here. And when I look at the color channel, it's just doing that. I'm using a mask. So my default workflow, and this should be y'all's default workflow, the default workflow should be not painting. You should not be painting. That sounds weird, but generally speaking, you should not be creating paint layers and painting your materials. Once you know what you're doing, do that, because there's a lot of functionality to it. But you'll see in almost all of my stuff, they're just fill layers with masks on them. I paint inside of masks, or I use patterns inside of masks. Most of the time, I'm just using patterns, texture patterns. But we usually just have a fill layer with different material settings. And then we have a mask, which is controlling where that material is showing up, right? So in this case, I have this fill layer that's just a color. And then I have this mask where it's white, it's showing that color, right? So you can see if I turn it on and off, right? You see the color right here, which corresponds to my mask. And where it's black, this layer is turned off. I'll go ahead and make this really stark so you can see it. So you can see here, wherever the mask is white, this layer is activated, and where it's black, it's not activated. Pretty straightforward. hopefully. Let me know if things aren't straightforward. Okay, so usually what I'll do is I'll just, again, show this. So let's go ahead and hide this layer. I'll do this by default, so or from scratch. So I'll add a fill layer. So I just come up here, add a fill layer. I choose which attribute I want to be affecting. In this case, I just want to be affecting color. So I'll hold Alt and click on color. I'll find that color I'm wanting to use. So in this case, I want some of those oranges. So I might grab like some, I just start with something that's a little punchier and orange, like that. Let's turn that on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a black mask, or nowadays in Substance Painter, thankfully, you can just come over here and drag it onto the mask. So I don't need to start with a black mask right away. I can come in here and find a pattern. So in this case, it's kind of just an organic, grungy pattern, right? Doesn't have any special shapes to it. So I could use a lot of different ones. It's once you get used to Substance Painter, you'll know which maps you kind of want to look out for, because we're looking for shapes and patterns and identifying those. So I think probably looking at these, we have these blobby, splotchy ones. So I think probably something like black and white spots might be good. So let's just try that out. And I'm just going to drag it over here, that little mask icon right there. And there we go. We already have that locked in. So I always look at my masks to see what they're doing, because it's not always obvious. And then it's good to get used to playing around with them, right? So let's go ahead and play with these settings. So in this case, this particular one has like very interesting noise parameters to it, which is cool. It has scale parameters. In this case, this object, I don't really have to care about the UVs, but if I had UV seams and they're showing up, what I would do is I would change to triplanar projection, so that I don't have to worry about UV seams, because by default it follows the UVs. This thing's so cleverly cut that it's really hard to see the seams, but you can see there's a seam here. There's going to be a seam there if I do triplanar too, most likely. Let's see. It's a little less noticeable. But this isn't worrying about the UV cuts. It's just projecting from the 3D space. So I usually almost always am switching to triplanar most of the time. It depends on the situation, of course. So with triplanar, I'm going to have to maybe change the scale up. So I might make it a little bit bigger. Let's come out. And I might just change the tiling. So tiling is going to be your default scaling function, but some texture maps or texture patterns have a scale attribute as well. So they do the same thing. Let's hold Alt, and I'm going to click on this mask again. One of the other things that we need to keep in mind is every one of these black and white patterns in here also has a balance and contrast. Balance is going to be, I'm going to turn off this so we can see this a little bit. So balance is going to be like the distribution of light and dark. So it's just changing the values. If you guys have used a levels adjustment node, this is essentially a levels adjustment. So you can see if I want more visibility or more of this pattern to be white, I can bring the balance up. Or if I want less of this pattern, I can bring it down, bring this down lower, and the black spreads out. The cool thing about doing this is it gives you a very different texture map sometimes. Like that looks way different than the default. So you can get some of these patterns have like many different patterns built into them if you know what you're doing. Contrast is going to do, if you're familiar with contrast, exactly what it sounds like, right? It's going to increase the difference between the lights and darks, and you're going to remove the gray values. So as I do this, you can see all the gray values are disappearing and everything's going to black and white, and it gives you a harsher look instead of a soft look. So if I come in here and I up the contrast, right, I get something like that. So I might do a little contrast. Let's go ahead and tile this up a little bit, and then maybe let's do that contrast again. Unfortunately, this does not look that great. It does not look that great. Okay, cool. All right, so we'll do something like that. One of the downsides, and another mistake that a lot of people make early on is, I think this map looks great, but I'm going to show you an example with something like this, which is more regular, Gaussian spots. Great texture map. Use it all the time, but let's do it down here. So I'll use this all the time for just like generic noise. If I want to make the surface like a little busier, a little bit more interesting, right? You can see it just gives it a little bit more information and noise, right? The problem is it's evenly distributed. It's everywhere, right? Take a sample here, take a sample here, the present's going to be the same. That's not very natural. If you look at this too, right? Like look at how much these dark orange spots are down here, but there's like this cluster of light yellow spots are up here, right? I could manually paint those in locations, but if I want to give it a more organic kind of distribution, what I'll do is I'll combine this texture map with another texture map. So I'll add another fill layer, or I can come in here and just add another one on. So let's grab something that's like bigger and chunkier, so it has bigger shapes. So if I grab something like this one has really big shape changes, right? So we have something like this. And let's go ahead and tile it down a little bit like that. Okay. So I want this one, but I kind of want like the distribution like this, where it's like clustered, right? So right now this is obviously not working, right? Because this is just overriding it. And now it's just this pattern, and this pattern below it has no effect. But I can use those blending modes. So a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm doing a screen or a multiply blending mode in my mask. So if I set this to multiply, you'll see that all of those black values on this layer right here is darkening the layer below. All the white ones are being ignored. So if I come in here and I go to multiply, you guys can see all the white spots are invisible and all the black spots are darkening the layer below, which is great, right? I'm already getting a little bit more like organic nature to it, right? It feels a little bit more natural to it. If I did the opposite, right? So if I come over here and did screen, come in to do screen, you'll see the texture shows through the black spots, but not through the white spots. The white spots are being added to the layer below, right? And then, overlay is going to be somewhere in between, right? You can see them in both. So in this, most of the time, when I'm trying to just add some breakup to my pattern, my texture pattern, most of the time I'm just doing something like multiply or screen. And if I need to, I can just do balance, right? Like I don't want to have that sparse of a distribution, right? So maybe I just want to change the balance of this multiplied map right here, so you can see it shrinks a little bit. Or I can play with the contrast, make it harsher or smoother. Depends on the textures that I'm looking at, right? So anyways, yeah, this is, I love it. It's great. Let's go ahead and I'm going to delete these effects. All right, so I have this layer. Is that in that room right there? Huh. My guess is they're doing work. So sorry, guys, we're just going to have to work through it, so no worries. So on this one, I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit darker, a little bit punchier. I'm going to keep moving on, though. So you can see here I have another one. So on this other one, I was trying to get these like lighter green yellow spots. So on this one here, we can see I have this other pattern. This one I just did it says 3D Berlin noise, but it's actually a grunge galvanized. So I love this grunge galvanized because it gives these kind of mushy, I don't know how to describe them, but I like doing them a lot on metals because metal patterns tend to have that galvanized kind of feature to them as they age and change. And so I just came in here and I just gave it a little bit more of a green yellow, and I can maybe push it a little bit more towards that yellow. So you can see I'm starting to get a little bit more of that color, right? When you're doing blend modes, if I'm doing just a straight up color, so you can see this one right here, I'm not doing a blending mode in the color, I'm just doing normal. I can do color selection, right? I can color drop it. But if I'm doing a blending mode, because it's mixing with the layer below, I kind of have to eyeball it, right? I can't just change this color to match this color because it's mixing with the layer below, right? Something else I like to do, let's get rid of this one as well. So, and always, okay, I swear to God, if I open y'all's files and I come around and you guys don't do this, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to be disappointed. Is you got to name your layers as you're going. Do it as you're going. Take a very second as you're going and do it. So I'm going to call this one color breakup. Okay. Something you'll notice on this layer. Does anybody else notice something different on this layer besides the color change? Yeah, the roughness is changing too, and so is the metalness. So if I look at the color channel, right? So obviously the color is changing. But if I look at the metallic channel, you can see I'm modifying it, and I'm also modifying it my roughness channel. I like to do that a lot of times if I'm doing like big scale color breakup, is also letting it modulate my roughness. And if I'm doing metals, my metal. If I'm not doing metals, if you're doing a non-metal, don't mess with metal. Just leave metal black, right? Never make a non-metal metallic unless you have a reason for it, right? But you can see here, I turned on roughness, and we've been looking at the blending modes just for base color, but all of the other channels also have blending modes, right? In this case, they're all normal. I've just set it to normal. If I look at this roughness channel, when I turn it on, it's just overriding the layer below, right? And I'm just changing the roughness channel here. But I could also, again, similarly have it overlay, right? So it's going to mix with the layer below, and it's not going to just like override it. So if you add in this roughness breakup, and all of a sudden it's like covering up a lot of interesting texture you have. You could just use blending modes to help bring that back, right? So, and again, this is one of those things where I like to look at the channel, but I also need to come out here and see what effect it's having on my material, right? So I'm just seeing what, and just adding that little information. Sometimes, let's set that back. All right, set back here. So just adding a little bit of information sometimes goes a long way to just adding a little bit of texture. And you can see I made things like a little bit more or a little less metallic. So on this one, I might bring my metalness up and maybe make these parts a little more metallic and a little less rough, right? So they can be a little glossier or more rough. I don't know. Could be either one. So the cool thing about this is in just these a few 3 layers, right? I have a lot of richness to my texture map, right? I have a lot of interesting information. And so this is going to work pretty well for my base material. There's one more thing I'm going to add here before I move on to like some of the other features, but I added the spots. So I'm noticing these characteristic little spots here. And so actually this one really should be overlaid. So let's come here and I'm going to change this color so we can start to see it pop up. Let's set it to brighter. Maybe I might have to do normal. Yeah, maybe I might probably just gonna have to do normal. So let's set it to normal and I'm going to set the opacity a little lower so we can see the information below. And this one right here is just using, again, I'm using that same philosophy where I start with a pattern. In this case, I use the 3D noise pattern. So the 3D noise patterns can give you some of the best textures you can find, but they're just more complex to use. So I just went ahead and dragged one of these here. So 3D Perlin noise. The cool thing about 3D Perlin noise is they're not UV based by default. It says UV, but it does not care about your UVs. It's actually doing 3D projection. So what I'm going to do is, well, actually, I think that's true. That might not be true. Yeah, okay, yes. By default, it is 3D because it's called the 3D noise. So if I come down here, the cool thing is I have all these different settings on here. So I can change like contrast, I can change balance, I can get very different texture maps. And so that's kind of how I made this pattern right here is I was just playing around with this 3D noise, right? I wanted some smaller bits. So a lot of times when you add like spots and dents and things like that or scratches, the tendency, another fallacy, pitfall, that's a better word. Another pitfall that you can run into is using the same size for that texture across your whole object. It's a good idea that if you have spots or scratches or dirt or mud or something like that is to mix in different sizes. So you can see I have this layer here and I have the same layer and I just scaled it down a little bit. So I just changed the scale a little bit to be a little bit smaller, right? And then I just set it to, if I just set it to normal mode, it would just override the layer below. But if I set to screen, all the light values are going to be added to the layer below. And so then now I have both big shapes and small shapes, which gives it a little bit more of like a natural look to it. And if I feel like there's too many of them, I could just bring the balance down on these guys, right? Which is going to shrink them and cause them to disappear. I could change the scale, but I think this is looking pretty good. And again, they're everywhere. And so to add some variation, I just added a cloud pattern and just set it to multiply to erase it in some areas. Just to add some variation and breakup. Okay, so that's my base material. And if I wanted to, I could totally just take this, Control G, or add it to a folder, and I'm just going to call this base metal. Okay. I like organizing things that way. It makes me happy. All right. So this one, I'm not going to go over this right here because you guys don't have to do this. If you guys need something like I have here, where the main thing is I needed forms to work with, and this guy didn't have great forms to work with. If you want to do it, you could use the Jade Toad. So we looked at the Jade Toad. Jade Toad has a lot of surface information, which is great. This object, I started on this and I kind of ran into a corner. I was like, oh crap, I don't have a bunch of surface information to work with. So what I did was I just created like some displacement stuff. So we're not going to worry about how I got those, which might sound frustrating, but just pretend this is part of the model. Okay. I'll come back to dents and scratches, but essentially what I did to enable to do this, because if we look at our mesh maps, right? If I look at my mesh maps, you see I have my curvature and ambient occlusion. But the problem is that surface information I made does not show up in those mesh maps, right? Because the mesh maps are based on your geometry. It's not based on your models. So you don't have to worry about what I'm doing here. I'm just saying it to you right now is I'm using essentially a trick to grab the height information so I can use it in my smart masks. So my masks use the mesh map information. So if I don't have that model information inside my mesh maps, then those smart masks aren't going to care about this surface here. So anyways, the first thing I started with was the white crud, because the white crud is probably one of the easiest things. So you can see I have just this material here, and I could make this a lot more interesting, like the corrosion, which we'll show. What I should be doing is I should be creating a folder, and we'll call this one white crud. And let's take, I'm just going to take this mask right here, and I'm going to put it in the folder. So we're just going to put that folders mask, and I'm going to delete these. So I'll delete, and I'm going to clear mask. So remove mask, and I'm going to put this inside the folder. All right, so it's the same thing. So let's pretend I did it this way. So I created a folder. Let's disable the toggle the mask for a second. So I'm going to toggle mask. So it's just this base material. So now I'm going to make my base material for this white dirt stuff. So you see I started off with this kind of like, it probably could be a little rougher. Let's add some color variation. We can see there's like color and height information here. So I'm going to add a new fill layer to get some color breakup and height breakup. So I'm just going to do color and height. And so just add a little bit of height, and let's make the color. We can go ahead and color select. Let's do something like that. Let's make it a little bit. I'll just go to manually do it. So we'll just add some color breakup here. And then I'm just going to add something that's like probably like the dirt pattern. I think the dirt patterns are pretty great. So we're just going to grab the dirt pattern, add that on there. And let's make that height negative. So I'm just going to eat away into the surface. And let's go ahead and take that dirt pattern and make it a little higher contrast and change the balance. Maybe a little less contrast. So I need some breakup. I just need some kind of variation to it. One thing I didn't talk about is that my settings in here, my texture set settings. So my textures are really high res. And that's because I'm working on a powerful computer. These computers are really powerful, and my computer at home is pretty powerful. And so if you come into your texture set settings, and you can see my texture set is 4K. So that means in the viewport, what I'm looking at is my 4K size texture maps. If I go down to 2K or 1K, my computer's going to go way faster, but my textures aren't going to look as good. So it really depends on what your computer is doing or what your computer can handle. That's why I recommend working on a strong computer, is because this takes up a lot of resources. So here we go. I'm just working 4K, so just keep that in mind. Another thing I have on as well is I have shadows turned on. So that just gives me like this kind of like cast shadow effect, which makes it feel a little bit more believable. Again, this is going to cause computation weight on your computer. And I also have displacement on. So if you come over to your shader settings and go down to displacement, I set my displacement height up a little bit. And so that just makes the surface push out. You don't have to do that unless you're doing big changes. Anyways, I just wanted to point that out. Okay. So this is probably like way too much height. So I'm just gonna kind of dial this in a little bit just to get a little breakup. And let's go ahead and just get this to be something a little bit different. Okay, cool. Doesn't really matter. And so on this, let's go ahead and toggle that mask. So I'm doing this white junk buildup. And so if we come in here, what I'm doing is I'm using one of these smart masks. So this mask right here, I found under the smart masks. So if I made my mesh maps, we didn't bake my mesh maps. So if you bring in a model from outside, you're not going to have your mesh maps by default. So if you press B on your keyboard or you come in here and look at these will probably be blank by default. So you do have to bake your mesh maps. If you're working from something like Jade Toad or Meat Mat or this preview sphere, they're going to by default have mesh maps on them, but it's so easy to bake mesh maps. I don't know why you wouldn't just do it yourself. Again, if you do bake mesh maps, okay, I don't know why this is down here. Just make sure your output size is 4K. It's super important. And there's bake texture maps. You don't need all of them. You just need these ones. I don't need ID. The other ones I arguably might not need, but I'm going to use them. And you just bake them. And depending on your computer, again, it can take a little bit longer. So anyways, I used one of these smart masks. So I most likely did something like cavity detection. So any of these ones where it looks like it's like building up white in the crevices, that's what I use. So I probably use something like dirt cavity and just dragged it on here and put it in my mask, right? Inside the mask builder, we're not going to go over it, but I recommend you guys spend some time playing around with mask builders. This is an old one. Mask Generator is a newer one, but they have some legacy stuff in here. But these can be really, really helpful, but I will admit they're not easy to use. They're not easy to understand. So they are using all those curvature, ambient occlusion, This one doesn't have thickness. It has gradient, which is height. But it has all these things. And so if I'm going to hold Alt so we can look at this. And so we can see, right, it's using that surface geometry information from my mesh map, and it is giving me like this information that I can work with. And it's also mixing in like a grunge map to give it a little bit of like character to it in this one, right? If I went ahead and added in, let's see, let's take a look at a different one. So here's like moss from top, right? So this one right here is using the height information, or sorry, not the height position, the position information, right? So it's doing something that where it's higher up, it gets more of the mask, and where it's down low, it gets less of the mask, right? So these are really cool because they, they do some really interesting stuff based on your model. Very, very useful, very, very important for surfacing. So I just used one of those. I used a sharpen mask just to kind of get some details or filter. So I just added a filter. So you go here, right click filter, and we can come here and do sharpen. And so I just added some like crispness to my details. You gotta be careful because this can easily get like kind of like fuzzy and look really gross, but I just wanted that to be a little bit crunchier. And then what I did in here was I again used a fill layer and set it to multiply to kind of like subtract and add a little bit more variation to the surface. I also hand painted it. So I just went in here and I went with a paintbrush. So I use the paintbrush tool, go over here to something like let's say I went for something organic, and then I just set it to black, and then turn off these pin pressure things if you don't have a tablet. And I'm just using the low flow. So flow is like kind of building up your oops, let's turn that on. As you scrub over an area, it's going to get darker and darker and darker and apply more and more paint. So that's kind of like if I kind of wanted to give like a hand touch feeling, right? It felt like a little too regular, and I was fighting that flower pattern. So I was just coming in here, and if I did white, you can see it's building that white up. Black, it's removing, right? So that was just adding a little hand touch. This one right here is a paint layer that's being used to mask out whole areas. So for this one, what I did, let's go hold Alt and go back into the mask. I'll go ahead and hide that one. I'll add a new paint layer by right-clicking and saying Add Paint. And on this one, I'm going to switch over to the Polygon Fill tool. So the Polygon Fill tool is going to be like a paint tool, but instead of it being like stamping on wherever I click, it's going to fill in polygons, geometry, or UVs. So you can see polygon, mesh fill, or UV chunk fill. So I just switched to black because I wanted to turn it off of this object over here. This was just a whole object. So instead, I'm going to do UVs. So you can see this is going by based on UV aisle. And if I looked at the UVs and 2D and 3D view, you can see as I'm clicking on this, like these guys are disappearing because it's hiding a whole UV chunk. So I can go here, maybe get rid of those guys. And so, yeah, that looks good enough to me. That's essentially what I was doing is I wanted to mask off this area and I didn't want that white junk to build up on the main body of this. Okay, let's go back to 3D view and switch off of that polygon fill. So that was just my kind of white crud material. The white crud material just has a completely different property. I want it to be like more of like a dirt or dust or non-metal. So I made it non-metallic. I gave it its different height. Okay, something I added here pretty early on is some roughness breakup. This one's really, really subtle. But on this map, I just added a texture map to the roughness channel. Let's go look at the roughness channel really quick. And so I have it really low at 15. If I set it up higher, you can see that roughness breakup on the surface, right? So it's just adding a little bit more variation to my roughness surface or my roughness channel. So that was just one where I was just early on, I was feeling kind of like it was looking a little flat on the surface. So I just added that roughness to add a little bit more character to it, right? If you're looking at your surface and it feels very CG, chances are it needs some kind of breakup on it. Something else I added pretty early on is this like dents and scratches. So here on this one, this is pretty simple. All I did was I made a fill layer where I made the material rougher and I pushed it down into the surface. So you can see it's pushing down into the surface. Wow. And this is just roughness, which is just changing the specular roughness. So I wanted to get like kind of like there's like a little pit right here. And so there's little areas where there's like little pits and dents. And so I just use like a low frequency texture map here. right? So it's just like I have this grunge shavings. I'm subtracting and added a hand mark right here. So let's just focus on these ones first. So right here, I just wanted to add that. I noticed there was like some characteristic ones, so I wanted to add my own. So I could either paint it, or another thing you can do is you come over here to your alphas because they have some like interesting shapes in them. And so I would just find something that's like a grungy kind of mark, right? So let's see, crunch, 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 crunch. It doesn't really matter. This is really small, but you can drag on it, and this is going to place this in 3D mode. So you'll see it's really annoying because it does it by it does this, and then it creates a full new layer. But I'm just going to Control X to cut that. I don't want a whole new layer. I want to put it here. So I'll put it in here. And if I select this guy and let's go ahead and press Alt. Okay. Should be able to move him. UV projection, warp projection. There we go. So warp projection's cool because you can like move whoa. Okay, this one's I'm on the wrong one. Whoops. It should be this one, Stain Nugget. Okay. It's a great name. So Stain Nugget right here, it's being masked off by something. You can see I can move it around on the surface, which is cool. So on this, I can like move this to a very particular location. I can use like the 3D like move shortcuts and from Maya, like QWER. And then if I click off of it, I can see that. And so I have like a, little characteristic kind of mark making. So that was like doing some dents and scratches. Reason why I have these on a different layer is because I wanted them to be part of that height. So you can see that gunk building up. If I come up here, I have even more scratches. Let's set this back to base color so we can see these better. So on this one, I have scratches. So this one's, again, just adding some roughness and pushing into the height a little bit. And so this is just to get some like imperfections on the surface. Same idea. If I alt click on this, I just started with this grunge scratch generator. Let's go ahead and duplicate it. And this one right here, I'm going to tile it more so to get some smaller, tinier scratches. And then we're going to combine it with the layer below by doing screen. So we can see the bigger scratches. And then I'm just using a grunge map to kind of block out and erase stuff. So we're just doing multiply. So just so it's not so frequent everywhere. So here's the small details, little tiny ones. Here's the big ones. And here's that blocker. Okay, so that just adds a little bit of extra character to the surface. And this is a harsh object, right? It's metal, so it's going to scratch easily. It's going to have sharp marks on it. So scratches make a lot of sense, like big, sharp scratches on this. On something like ceramic or leather, I might not have such sharp scratches. Okay. I have two more layers, and I'm going to speed up this next part and just more talk about it. But I have a burnishing layer. So for this one, what I was trying to do was I was trying to get that kind of blue burnish feeling where it might be like oil deposits from people rubbing it or touching it, or it might just be natural decay. But I just have this like blue color, and it's just making this a little, changing the metalness a little bit. And it's making it less metallic. And I'm adding this blue color because I'm noticing like a blue dark tint to it. And so I've set that color to multiply. I might make it a little bit brighter, maybe a little bit more saturated, so something like that. And so that was just to get that kind of burnished effect. And my map just looks like this. You can see I did something similar. I just used the mask editor, but I didn't like how it was just localized right there. So I just went ahead and painted on it just for fun. And then I did my patina corrosion. And this one, I wish I spent more time on it because it's way more nuanced. But again, I just did something. In this case, I made a folder because it's a completely different material like the white crud. And so what I did here was I just did a base material. Let's disable the mask. So we're just going to toggle the mask here. So I just did a base material. Let's hide the white stuff. So again, I just came here, gave it pretty high roughness because I knew it was going to be pretty rough. No metalness. I just went in here and color selected one of the green colors here. And then I just added some color breakup to it, right? And a little bit of, you can see there's a little bit of height and roughness breakup as well, just to give it a little bit more characteristic, right? So if I go toggle here. And then I'm just doing a mask here because I want it to be like, and I was just trying to make it somewhere else. But what I would do is I try to blend it a little bit better because you can see this is a lot softer and I have these really harsh edges to it. But I just wanted to get these aspects in here. And so you can see with like layering these things up, it starts to look pretty interesting and dare I say sophisticated. One last thing I do at the end is an adjustment. So an adjustment layer is using a special blending mode called pass-through. So all the other blending modes are like mixing with the layers below, but pass-through blending mode, what it does is it means it's essentially taking whatever's happening to this layer and it's applying whatever's happening to this layer to everything below it. So what I do is I use this for an adjustment layer, right? So in here, what I'm doing is the first thing I'm doing is I'm sharpening, right? So I'm sharpening all my details. So you can see all my details get a little bit more higher res because after you layer a bunch of things on together, things tend to get a little muddy and a little soft. So in order to make the adjustment layer work, you have to go to the channel you want it to be affecting and make sure it's set to pass through. So I went to base color, set to pass through, metallic. I probably should set it to pass through. Roughness, set it to pass through. Height, set it to pass through because I want to adjust all those. And then on the sharpen layer, you can see I'm sharpening the details in the color, metalness, and roughness. I could do it in the height too, I guess, but I guess it's not super necessary. I did a levels adjustment for the roughness. So if we take a look at the roughness channel, here we go. Roughness channel, I made everything a little bit higher contrast. So I just upped the contrast on my specular reflection so that when this light moves across it, it's a little bit more interesting. So here's that levels adjustment. So I just right-clicked and add a levels node. Sharpen is a filter, right? Levels node, so I just add it to this adjustment layer. So it's back to base color. And I just said I want to affect the roughness. And now I can change the quality of all of my reflection values below, right? So I'm just kind of changing, like, if I bring the input white and input black together, I'm going to get higher contrast. So I'm going to get some more extreme kind of differences between my reflections. If I move the gray or the mid value, this gray mid value, it's going to make my stuff overall more sharp or more glossy. So it's just going to change my overall reflections. And then if I change the output, it's going to set my max and min. So if I don't want anything to be more rough than this, I can bring this up down lower so I can never get values that are higher than 0.6 roughness. But generally speaking, all I did really was I just added a little bit of contrast to this to make it a little bit more eye-catching. And you see like those reflections like right around here that pops a little bit better. And then the last thing I did was because I was looking at this so much and not this, it was looking a little too colorful, right? This is very colorful. If I look at the base color, right? This is very colorful compared to it. So what I did was I just went ahead and added the HSL perceptive, had it only affect color. So it's just another filter. And I just brought the saturation down a little bit to make it a little bit more muted. Cool. All right. Does anybody have any questions? That was a lot. I'm recording this, so I'll upload this later. But don't forget that I also have on the drive, I mean, you can open these files and take a look at them for yourselves if you're curious. Like I said, I also have other videos where I do the same thing, right? So I have a video where I do this, but with a ceramic material. So just watching and opening up these files and studying them can be a great way to just learn new workflows and techniques on how to do stuff in Substance Painter. You'll see I did a lot of different things in Substance Painter, right? Like I was using filters, I was using anchor points, even though you guys didn't see me use anchor points. I was using mesh maps, I was using generators, I was using all kinds of things, right? And so it's a lot to learn, but you're not going to learn that by just like watching like Substance Painters videos and just trying to remember it. I think you learn from watching someone else do it and opening up projects and going through the layers and seeing how they're doing it. Okay, just like we did here. Cool. All right. So don't forget, y'all's homework is due Tuesday. Do not wait too long to get started. I've done this for many years. This took me about 2 hours, right? And I'm very experienced. So if you're not experienced, and I'm not even done with my material, I need to work more on it. That means I have a lot more time I need to spend on it. So do not wait till the last minute to work on this because your materials are going to be bad. Okay. So if you guys need any help or you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us through email. We can set up office hours if you need help with Substance Painter or just need help texturing. And other than that, I'll see you guys on Tuesday. All right. Thanks, guys. Wait, oh, it's recording. Let's see. Oops.